What's going on, everyone, and welcome back. I just finished recording the last episode, and I was gonna program this out for text anchoring for like buttons and stuff, but I decided against that and just go ahead and do a centered button. So I went ahead and typed it all out, and we're just going to kind of go over what I did to get the text to center on the button. So as you can tell, it's centered versus all the way to the left. And I did not center that one. So I can also kind of add that as well, just so that you can see it being added. So basically all I did was right here in font, I needed the font height. Like each character has a specified height, which is kind of like the max height of the font, which I put right here. So I have it returning the max font height, so public float font height return H. And H, what we did was we had it right here in draw characters. It was somewhere like right here or something. It said like float H equals whatever, whatever. So I basically just copied that and I pasted it here. And to generate font, so right below font matrix, I went ahead and posted it right there. It took away the float initialization over here, or not initialization, but yeah, whatever. So now I can call that there, and I put it the variable itself up here. So private float H. So that will, whenever the font is created and it begins generating the font, then it gets the max height for that font and it caches it so that I can use it later. And right here I created a centered button function. And I was going to do text anchoring, but I decided centered buttons will be just fine. And later on down the road, then we can do a full tutorial on text area anchoring and stuff like that. Because it's not quite text alignment, because text alignment is different than text area anchoring. Because text alignment would be, going towards the right, versus text area alignment would be the whole text would be set to the right side of the screen. So we'll do that later, but we'll put it inside of this function and then just change the function name. So all of this will be reused as well. So it's basically exactly the same as button. As you can see right here, it's almost identical. I actually copy and pasted it down here, and then I just removed this part because we don't really need that in both sections, because we only need one label, because, well, the label is always going to have the same X and Y positions if it's centered, regardless of whether or not there's a style or not. So it's basically exactly the same. The only difference is this right here, the X position and the Y position. Now what it is it's rf.x, so it's the rect that, or it's the clamped area rect, which we also have right here. It's exactly the same. So we take the x position of it, and then we add in the width of RF divided by 2. So we get the center position of the, or the center width of the area, and then we subtract half of the text size, and then we just add it to the rect_x. Same thing down here with height. We take the height of the area divided by 2 minus the height of the font divided by 2, and then add it to the area's y position. And that's it. That gives us the x and y position to render it. Now, as for calling it, I went in here into menu bar, and I changed GUI.button to GUI.centered button. All right, hold on just a moment. Hey, Dad! So, basically in here, I just do that. I just change centered button, or button to centered button, because it's the same parameters and everything. So then I changed it here, and I changed it there. And then that makes it render it the way it does. So now let's do the pop-up as well. So we need to go into popup.java. Whenever we render the button, we're going to render it as a centered button instead. And as you can tell, I didn't change anything else. I just changed it from button to center button. And this should as well, yes, center it in there very nicely. And so that is it for this tutorial. And I will see you next week whenever we start going into like workspace and settings, and the first thing that we're going to get into is whatever in the hell you call it, loaders. So we need to be able to pop up an application loader or whatever when we click on it, and it should say what project we're opening and all that fun stuff, where our project settings are. We're going to do that next episode. So that should be fairly decent. We're going to get into some XML as well. So some file formats that we've already done. We've already done some custom file formats. Next, we are going to be doing XML format for the settings for the application. And then when we get into scene loading, our scene format is going to be a custom XML format. So it's going to be similar to XML, but it's going to be way faster. You might say, way faster? Well, XML is already fast. XML already knows what it's doing, all this crap. Well, some people just take XML and they place it on this pedestal. Well, what XML does is it reads in the entire file, and then it searches for what you're looking for. So, for instance, you have an entire scene that has hundreds of game objects. If you're wanting to find an object in an XML file, and this is just, I know there's a million different ways to write this, but this is just an example if that's exactly what you were doing, even though you shouldn't do that. But what XML does is it would read in the entire scene, and then after the entire scene is read in, then it would look for that specific one game object. Well, the XML format that we're writing, or that we're going to write for our scenes, is it reads in only up to, or it reads it in as, well, it's reading it in. So if we get to something that we're looking for, then it creates it as we're reading it in, not after. And that's where XML falls short, is you have to read it all in before you can find this stupid thing. Or some people write XML where, yes, it does read it in and then find it, but it does it every time. And there's tons of different ways you can write XML. But the way that we're going to be writing it, it's going to, like I said, import it as it's reading it in, and not multiple times and all this other crap. Later on, we may get into some JSON, possibly, depending on what we're doing. I don't know. I want to do all these different formats just so that I can show people how they work. Because a lot of people download all this other crap to be able to use JSON or XML or HTML or whatever they're using. Like they download all this other stuff and they don't know how to do it themselves. And so I might as well teach all this stuff too. And that's why I'm adding some custom formats in there as well, because custom formats are good. Like, you can use predetermined stuff like XML, and you may need a different way of how it reads in the information or how it stores the information. So it's always good to know how to write these things, because every situation is going to be different. And regular XML may be great for some other thing versus some other thing. Like how XML will be good for our application setting storage, but it's not going to be good for our scene file format. So it's good to know these things. So I will see you next week when we start doing these application loaders, these bootloaders. So I will see you then, and have a good week.